He paid $300 for a strip of land nobody wanted. 52 years later, the bank that laughed at him sent a lawyer to beg. What Ruben Dempsey knew and never told anyone is the kind of story that only makes sense once you see how it ends. Garrett Foles did not sleep the night before he called. He had been a real estate attorney for 11 years. He had handled title disputes, easement fights, boundary corrections. He had never called a 71-year-old man at 7 in the morning and heard the man sound like he had been awake for hours already. Ruben Dempsey picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Dempsey," Garrett said, "I need you to understand the scope of what your trust is attempting here. First Capital Regional has operated on that corner for 41 years. They have. I know how long they've been there," Ruben said. Garrett kept going. He said words like injunction. He said words like baseless claim. He said the trust had no legal standing, that a document from 1971 had no force against a commercial institution with 41 years of continuous operation, that what Ruben was attempting was not just wrong but aggressive. Ruben set his coffee cup on the kitchen table. "Does your client know what a reversionary clause is?" he said. Garrett stopped. Outside the window, the morning was gray. A truck passed on Route 9. Ruben watched it go. "I suggest you pull the 1971 filing before your next call," Ruben said. "All 23 pages." He hung up. He refilled his coffee. He sat back down at the same table he had eaten breakfast at for 36 years. He was not nervous. He had not been nervous about this in a very long time. Millhaven, Iowa was not the kind of town where big things happened. It had a grain elevator, a diner, a hardware store that had been sold twice since Ruben was born, and a First Capital Community Bank branch on the corner of Millhaven and Route 9. It had folding tables at the county courthouse on auction days and a coffee pot that never made good coffee. October 14, 1971 was an auction day. Harold Butts had died in July with no will and 3 creditors. The county had broken his land into parcels. 14 men showed up to watch it get sold. Most of them knew each other. Most of them had opinions about what the land was worth and were not quiet about those opinions. Ruben Dempsey was 22. He had driven his father's truck. He wore the same coat he wore every fall, the one with the deep right pocket, and inside that pocket was a folded piece of paper he had not shown to anyone. He stood near the back and watched. Lot 4 sold first, 6.2 acres with road frontage and an old equipment shed. Dale Pruitt bought it for $9,000 without hesitating. Dale was the branch manager at First Capital. He was 44 years old, had a wide handshake and a louder voice than the room required, and had already told half of Millhaven County that he had plans for Harold Buss's property. He had said the word development enough times that people had started saying it back to him just to watch him smile. Lot 6 sold next, 3.8 acres. Dale bought that one too, $9,400. He nodded at the auctioneer like a man confirming something he had already decided. Then came Lot 7C. The auctioneer read it out from his clipboard, 41 feet wide, 112 feet deep, no structure, no road frontage. Back of the old hardware store parcel, gravel and scrub and 1 dead elm tree, no minimum bid. Ruben raised his hand, $300. The room went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then Dale Pruitt laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It was the kind of laugh a man makes when he wants the room to laugh with him, and 3 or 4 of the men at the folding tables did laugh, softly, into their coffee cups. "Son," Dale said, looking somewhere between Ruben and the wall. "You just paid $300 for a drainage ditch." A few more men smiled. The auctioneer moved on. Ruben walked to the clerk's table. He signed the transfer papers. His hand did not shake. He did not look at Dale Pruitt. He did not say anything to anyone. The clerk handed him his copy of the deed. Ruben folded it once. He slid it into his right coat pocket, next to the other piece of paper that was already there. He shook the clerk's hand. He walked out. The drive home took 20 minutes. Ruben did not turn on the radio. He had met Marion 2 years earlier at a church function neither of them had wanted to attend. She was 20 years old, studying bookkeeping, and she asked him on the 3rd date what he was saving money for. He had told her, land. She had nodded like that was the most reasonable thing she had ever heard. She was in the kitchen when he got home. She looked at his face. "Did you get it?" "Yes." She turned back to the stove. She did not ask what lot. She did not ask why. She had learned early and without resentment that Ruben would explain things when he was ready and not before. He hung up his coat on the hook by the door. He did not take the folded paper out of the pocket, not yet. He sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the window for a long time. Outside, somewhere 3 miles back down Route 9, Dale Pruitt was probably still talking about his plans. He was probably already making calls. He was probably already drawing lines on a map that did not include Lot 7C, because Lot 7C was a drainage ditch and drainage ditches did not matter. Dale did not know what Ruben had found 6 weeks earlier in the county records annex on the 2nd floor of the Millhaven Public Library. Nobody did, and Ruben was in no hurry to tell them. He sat at the table for a long time. The kitchen was warm. The light outside was fading. Somewhere in that coat pocket was a folded piece of paper, and that piece of paper was the reason $300 was the best money he had ever spent. He just needed time to make sure. Before this gets any crazier, hit subscribe. Because what Ruben found in that library is something nobody in Millhaven saw coming. And once you understand what that strip of land actually was, the rest of this story hits completely different. April 1971. The second Saturday in a row, Ruben Dempsey had driven to the public library before it opened. He sat at the same long table in the county records annex on the second floor. The room smelled like old paper and dust. The window faced the parking lot. He had brought a legal pad and 2 sharpened pencils and a thermos of coffee because the library's coffee was worse than the county courthouse's coffee, and the county courthouse's coffee was bad. He was not reading history. He was reading maps. The first map was the 1923 county plat for Millhaven Township. It showed every parcel, every easement, every recorded road and drainage corridor as of that year. Ruben had looked at it so many times he could have drawn it from memory. The second map was the 1947 Road Expansion Survey. That one was harder to find. It was filed under a state project number, not a county index. The librarian had needed 20 minutes to locate it in the annex basement. She had handed it to him with both hands because it was large and fragile, and she was not sure why anyone wanted it. Ruben unfolded it carefully on the table. The 1947 survey showed a proposed realignment of Route 9. The plan was to move the road 60 feet to the east. It would have widened the commercial corridor, created new frontage, and required the acquisition of a long, narrow strip of land running through the back of several Harold Boos parcels. The realignment was canceled in 1952 budget. The survey was never acted on. The state had filed the cancellation notice and moved on, but the survey itself was still on the books, and it had a legal description attached. Ruben read the legal description 4 times. He copied it onto his legal pad word for word. Then he looked at the 1923 plat map and traced the line with his finger. He circled Lot 7C. He sat back and drank some coffee. Then he went back to the filing cabinet. He had found the 1956 document by accident. He had been looking for a utility corridor map from the 1950s, not anything specific, just building the full picture. The filing was thin. A company called Midland Basin Resources had petitioned the county for a subsurface easement corridor along the same 60-foot alignment that the 1947 road survey had described. The petition was granted. Midland Basin had the right to run pipe under a narrow corridor through the back of those parcels. Ruben had read that part on his 7th Saturday at the library. He had written it down. He had gone home. He had come back 2 Saturdays later and kept pulling. Midland Basin was absorbed in 1961 by a company called Central Utilities Group. Central Utilities Group was absorbed in 1968 by a holding company called Tri-State Land Partners. He had needed 3 separate chain of title documents to trace it that far. Tri-State Land Partners had been dissolved in 1969. Failure to file annual registration. Ruben sat at the table for a long time after that. Under Iowa code, he already knew the answer. He had gone to the law section of the library 2 Saturdays before, just to be certain. An easement held by a dissolved entity did not simply disappear. It reverted. It went back to the underlying parcel owner at the time of dissolution. Harold Boos had died in July 1971. In 1969, Harold Boos had become the owner of a 60-foot subsurface easement corridor running through the back of his own property. He had never known, no one had ever told him. The county records showed no amendment, no transfer, no recognition. Just the original 1956 grant, the chain of absorptions, the 1969 dissolution, and then nothing. The easement was still alive on the books. It had simply been sitting there, attached to the land, waiting. Lot 7C sat at the midpoint of that corridor. If you bought Lot 7C, you bought the land. And when you bought the land, you bought whatever was attached to it. Ruben wrote that down on his legal pad in 6 words. He did not underline it. He did not need to. He drove home and spread the hand-drawn map on the kitchen table. Marion was making dinner. The kettle was on. She looked at the map the way she looked at most things Ruben brought home, carefully, without asking anything right away. The map was simple. He had drawn Route 9 as a straight line. He had drawn the Bussy parcels. He had drawn the old easement corridor as a shaded band running left to right across the page. Lot 7C was a small square in the middle of the band. Marion set 2 plates down and looked at the square. "Is that the one?" she said. "That's the one," Ruben said. She sat down. She poured her coffee. She did not ask what the square meant. She did not ask what the corridor meant. She had watched him spend 14 Saturdays in a library, and she had decided somewhere around Saturday 9 that he was not going to waste their time. Ruben folded the map and put it in the notebook she had given him the previous Christmas, brown cover. His name written inside the front in her handwriting. He picked up his fork. Over the next 7 months, Ruben drove past the Bussy parcels 31 times. He noted every visit in the notebook. He was not dramatic about it. He drove by on the way to other things, mostly. In March, he saw survey flags along the north edge of Lot 4, orange and white, 4 of them maybe 30 feet apart. In May, he saw fresh tire tracks in the gravel behind the old hardware store, wide tracks, something heavier than a pickup. In August, he saw a man in a collared shirt walking Lot 6 with a clipboard. He did not recognize the man. He wrote down the date. He pulled the county recorder's index every few weeks at the courthouse. He was looking for new filings. Transfer documents, LLC registrations, permit applications. In September, he found one. A company called Millhaven Development Partners LLC had been registered in Iowa that month. 2 principals. One of them was Dale Pruitt. Ruben wrote the name in the notebook. He wrote the registration date. He wrote the names of both principals. He looked at the page for a moment. Then he looked at his hand-drawn map. Lots 4 and 6 together gave Dale a solid block. 10 acres. Good frontage on Route 9. Enough to build a branch. Enough to build a drive-through, a parking lot, an access road running from the front to the service entrance in the back. The access road in the back would have to cross the old easement corridor. The easement corridor ran through Lot 7C. If you wanted to use what was under that ground, or run any service line, drainage pipe, or access lane across that strip, you needed the permission of whoever owned Lot 7C. And Lot 7C now costs $300 at the Harold Bussy auction. The auction was in October. Ruben closed the notebook. He did not say anything out loud. There was no one in the truck with him. He already knew. A knock at the door, Tuesday morning. Ruben was still on his first cup. The man on the porch was young and wore a good jacket and had the kind of smile that had probably worked for him in most situations. He introduced himself as a real estate agent with Midland Property Group. He had a card and a number written on the back of it. He handed the card to Ruben, $12,000. For Lot 7C, the agent said, clear title, cash close, 60 days. That's a 40 times return on your original purchase, Mr. Dempsey. Ruben looked at the number. $12,000 was not small money in 1983. It would have paid off the rest of the house mortgage. It would have put both kids through a year of school each. Ruben turned the card over. He read the agent's name on the front. No thank you, he said. The agent's smile held for another second. He was trained for mild resistance. I could take a counteroffer back to my client if there's a number that works for. There isn't, Ruben said. He thanked the agent for coming. He closed the door. Marion was at the kitchen table with her bookkeeping work. She had heard the conversation through the screen door. How much? She said. $12,000. She looked at him. Okay, she said, and went back to her ledger. She did not ask anything else. Ruben mowed Lot 7C twice a year. May and September, he used a push mower, and it took 40 minutes. He liked the 40 minutes. He liked having a reason to stand on the land and look at it. He paid the annual tax bill every April without fail. In 1983, it was $61. In 1987, it was $74. He wrote every payment in the brown notebook under a column he had labeled paid, date, amount, receipt number. $61, $74, $82 every year, without fail. The notebook was getting full. In 1989, the call came from a woman named Phyllis Hobart. She worked for the Millhaven County Planning Office. Her voice was formal, measured. She explained that the county was facilitating a commercial development project on parcels adjacent to his property, and that the county had been asked to assist in the acquisition of Lot 7C as part of the project's access requirements. The offer was $31,000. Ruben was standing in the kitchen. He had the phone cradled against his shoulder. He wrote the number in the notebook while she talked. I appreciate the call, Phyllis, he said. I'm not interested in selling. A pause. Mr. Dempsey, this offer accounts for the full assessed value of the parcel and includes a substantial premium. I understand that. The county would like to resolve this before the project moves into its permitting phase. I know you would, Ruben said. Thank you. He hung up. Marion was in the other room. She had heard the short side of the conversation. She came to the kitchen doorway. County? County, Ruben said. She went back to what she was doing. He wrote decline next to the number in the notebook. He underlined it once. Somewhere across town, in a rented office space above the hardware store that had since changed names twice, Dale Pruitt was on his own phone. He was louder than necessary. The project had a problem. The drive-through lane was 14 feet short. The permit application had been submitted with an access corridor that crossed the easement zone. The county engineer had flagged it. The engineer was not going to approve it until the easement question was resolved. Dale had told the project attorney this was a minor issue. The attorney had said it was not. Dale told his development partner in Des Moines that the old easement claim was a clerical error from decades ago, probably not even enforceable. His partner had asked for that in writing, and Dale had not been able to produce it. The project was delayed 14 months. Dale drove past Lot 7C on a Wednesday afternoon. The strip was mowed. The corner markers were clear. There was a small county tax receipt stapled to the fence post, dated April. He drove on. 8 years passed between the county's offer and the next one. In 1997, Ruben was 58 years old. His daughter Clara was 26 and had just passed the Iowa bar. His son was living in Des Moines. Marion had planted a garden in the backyard that had grown large enough to require its own sketch in the notebook. The third offer came in a letter with a Des Moines return address. The letterhead was from a firm Ruben did not recognize, but the second paragraph mentioned First Capital Regional, which was the name the bank had taken after merging with a larger institution in 1994. The firm was outside counsel. The offer was $88,000. The letter was 4 pages. Ruben read it at the kitchen table on a Thursday evening. Marion sat across from him with her tea. Clara was visiting for the weekend. She was on the couch with a case file. Ruben read to page 3. He set the letter down. Page 3 said the easement had been abandoned through non-use. It cited Iowa's easement abandonment statute. It claimed that 20 years of inaction voided the underlying rights. Ruben went to the bedroom filing cabinet. Bottom drawer, the manila folder. He took out 2 sheets of paper. The first was a letter he had written to the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in March of 1978. He had requested a formal acknowledgement of the Lot 7C corridor for potential future utility development. It was 1 paragraph. The second was the DNR's written response. 3 paragraphs, dated April 1978. Signed by a deputy director. That exchange was 19 years old. It predated the opposing counsel's abandonment clock by enough years to make the claim unworkable. Ruben put the papers back in the folder. He put the folder back in the bottom drawer. He wrote his response to the Des Moines firm in 2 sentences. The first acknowledged receipt of the letter. The second said he was not interested. Clara looked up from her case file. How big is the next one going to be? Bigger, Ruben said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she went back to her file. She had been 12 years old once, sitting at this same table, asking why her father drove past the same strip of gravel twice a month. He had told her, because it's mine. She had nodded like that answered the question. She had written it in a school notebook and brought it home and left it on the table for him to see. He had thought about that sometimes over the years. He thought about it now. Curtis Webb did not sound like a man making a final offer. He sounded like a man reading from a script someone else had written. The pauses were too even. The numbers came too smoothly. The phrase, "make this right," had been chosen by someone in a conference room who had never met Ruben Dempsey. $210,000, full easement release, clean break. Ruben looked out the kitchen window. November had come in dry. The notebook was open on the table. His last entry was from April, $94, tax paid, receipt number 2007-0041. 36 years of April entries. 36 years of mowing and paying and saying nothing. "I'll call you back," he said. He hung up before Curtis Webb could finish his next sentence. Then he called Clara. She drove down from Ames that Saturday, soft-sided briefcase, yellow legal pad. The kind of focused quiet she had learned from him without either of them ever discussing it. She pulled the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet open and spread everything across the kitchen table. The 1971 deed, the 1972 quiet title filing, 23 pages, the 1978 DNR correspondence. 36 years of tax records stacked 2 inches thick. She read for 40 minutes without speaking. Marion refilled Ruben's coffee and did not ask a single question. Clara looked up from the tax records. They taxed it every year. Every year, Ruben said. Then their abandonment claim dies in the first hearing. She picked up her phone and called Curtis Webb's office. First Capital Regional filed suit in February 2008. 47 pages, 3 counts. Their lead attorney, Garrett Foles, had deposed Ruben for 4 hours in January. He had asked about every document in the filing cabinet. He had not asked about a coat. The hearing on the motion to dismiss was held in March. Clara Dempsey appeared for the trust and set 3 documents on the table in front of her. The first was the original 1972 quiet title filing with the full 23-page easement rights claim attached. The second was the 1978 DNR correspondence, Ruben's letter dated March 3, 1978, and the DNR's written acknowledgement dated April 14, 1978. Both original documents, both signatures intact. The third was a single folded piece of paper inside a clear plastic sleeve. It was a handwritten note from the Millhaven County Recorder's Office, dated October 6, 1971, 8 days before the Harold Buss auction. The note confirmed, in the recorder's own hand, that Lot 7C of the Bussy estate carried an attached subsurface easement interest under the recorded Midland Basin Corridor grant, and that this interest would convey automatically with the transfer of the parcel under Iowa property law. The recorder had signed it. He had stamped it with the county office stamp. He had given it to Ruben because Ruben had walked into the recorder's office 8 days before the auction and asked very specifically whether the easement attached or transferred separately. The recorder had told him it attached. Then he had put it in writing because Ruben had asked him to. Ruben had folded the note and placed it in his right coat pocket. He had walked out of the county recorder's office and driven home and not told anyone what the note said. He had kept it in that coat pocket through the auction, through the laughter, through Dale Pruitt's loud, easy dismissal at the folding table. He had transferred it to a plastic sleeve in 1974 when the paper started to soften at the folds. Garrett Foles had deposed him for 4 hours and had not asked about any note. Clara laid the 3 documents flat. She did not arrange them for effect. She did not say anything about them. She just laid them down. The judge reviewed count 4. She looked at the trust constitution date, which was June 1972. She looked at the 1971 county recorder's note, which was October 1971. She looked at the 1972 quiet title filing, which had been made 7 months after the recorder's confirmation. She looked at the sequence. The trust had been properly constituted. The easement interest was documented prior to the trust's creation. The paperwork was in the correct order. There was nothing improper about the 1971 constitution of the Dempsey Family Land Trust. Count 4 was dismissed. The judge ruled in under a minute. She gave First Capital Regional 30 days to respond to the full easement rights claim or proceed to trial. Garrett Foles walked out of the building with his phone already to his ear. He had not said anything to Clara. He had not looked at Ruben, who had sat in the gallery for the entire hearing and had not needed to speak once. They settled in April. It took 6 weeks of back and forth between Clara and Curtis Webb's firm. The calls were professional. The letters were dense. Ruben read every draft that Clara brought to the kitchen table and made his notes in the margin in pencil and said the same thing each time. Not a sale. Not a sale. Not a lump sum. Not a one-time payment that ended the relationship and closed the file. What he would accept was a permanent easement license. First Capital Regional and any future owner or operator of lots 4 and 6 would pay the Dempsey Family Land Trust for the ongoing right to maintain the drive-through lane, the service access corridor, and all utility connections running through the subsurface easement zone of Lot 7C. Quarterly payments, indexed to inflation beginning in year 3, transferable to Ruben's heirs in perpetuity. The first payment, $4,100. Curtis Webb's associate pushed back on the inflation clause twice in writing and once on the phone. The second time on the phone, Clara let the associate finish. Then she said, "The county tax records go back to 1971. We can be in front of a judge in 60 days. Would your client prefer that?" The associate accepted every term. Clara called Ruben from the courthouse steps on a Thursday afternoon. "It's done," she said. "All right," Ruben said. A pause. "Dad, it's done. I heard you." She smiled. She could hear him not celebrating. "You knew," she said. "You knew from the beginning." "I knew the land," he said. "The rest of it was just waiting." He set the phone down on the kitchen table. Marion was already at the stove. She had heard the two-word side of the conversation the way she had heard 37 years of two-word sides of conversations. She did not ask what Clara had said. She did not turn around. She filled the kettle and turned on the burner. That was enough. That had always been enough. The signing was held at the county clerk's office on a Tuesday in late April. It was a mild day. Ruben wore his coat, not the same one from 1971, but the same style, same cut, deep right pocket. He signed his name 4 times. The clerk witnessed it. Clara witnessed it. A notary from First Capital Regional's law firm witnessed it and did not make eye contact with anyone. Ruben shook the clerk's hand on the way out. He drove home alone. He sat in the truck in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. He looked at the yard. He looked at Marion's garden, overgrown on the north edge the way she liked it. He looked at the kitchen window. He reached into the back seat and picked up the brown notebook. Marion had written his name inside the front cover 37 years ago, in her careful bookkeeping hand. The cover was worn at the corners. The spine had been repaired with tape twice. He opened it to the last page. He wrote 4 words at the bottom, "Paid, as I knew." He looked at the words for a moment. Then he closed the notebook and went inside. Across town, Garrett Foles read a 4-paragraph summary of the settlement agreement in the Friday edition of the Millhaven County Register. It was on page 6, below the fold. He read it once. He set the paper on his desk. He did not call anyone. He did not respond to his assistant's question about whether he wanted coffee. The senior partnership question resolved itself quietly 2 months later. 3 of the men who had laughed at the folding table in October 1971 were still alive. One heard about the settlement through his daughter, who had read about it online. He told her he did not remember the auction. She showed him the article anyway. He read it and set her phone down on the table and did not say anything. Nobody in that room, 37 years ago, had thought a 41-foot strip of gravel mattered. One man in that room had been reading about it in a library for 14 Saturdays before he ever walked through the door. Some men build banks. Ruben Dempsey built a trust, and then he let 37 years do the rest of the work. He paid $300 in 1971. He paid $94 in county taxes in 2007. He spent $340 on an attorney in 1972 to make the paperwork clean. First Capital Regional will pay $4,100 every quarter, adjusted for inflation for as long as that corner exists. To Ruben, then to his children, then to theirs. Dale Pruitt's laugh echoed for about 4 seconds in that auction room in October 1971. The quarterly payments will run longer than that. If you had been in Ruben's position, would you have taken the $210,000 up front and been done with it? Or would you have held out for the deal that never stops paying? That answer says more about you than you might think. Thanks for watching.